Hello and welcome back to Mikey's Flightdeck. Today I will show you how I made the first two sections of my overhead panel, which will be the flight and navigation panel. Luckily, Peter, a member of the community, gave me his plans and all the drawings of the panels he has made until now. And so I didn't have to design everything new from scratch. But even with his plans, I had to invest many hours to adapt the files to my needs and the free space I have left over in my cockpit ceiling. Here you can see the flight control panel and the navigation panel, and these are the two parts I will make in this video here. I had to adapt especially the cutouts for all the switches and the rotary knobs here, and also had to arrange all the fonts and cutouts when I have to think about the frame I will have to build later. And I think I finally found the font which comes near to the original Boeing font. When you look at the font of my annunciator I have built in my last video, you can see the ends of the letters are very hard, and especially look at the shape of the M. You will understand what I mean when I show you the next picture. When you compare this with a picture of a real Boeing panel, then you can see all the ends of the letters are rounded. The legs of the M go down straight, and this is a little bit different from the font I have used before. Many builders use these Futura font, but I think this isn't the correct font for the panels. And so I found this font here, which has the simple name MS33558. And when you look at the letters, then you can see everything comes really near the original font. Everything is rounded, and especially the legs of the M go down straight. And I think this will be the font I can use in the future. To avoid any breakouts when I cut the acrylic on my miter saw, I covered the end of the cut with a piece of wood. Now I have the problem that the hose for my switches, which are underneath the security caps here, are a little bit too low on this panel here. I can't place the hose security cap into here and it collides with the top panel. But instead of making these two underneath laying panels new, I will try to widen the hole a little bit more to the upper side of the panel. And I think the switches will still hold here. So this is not dramatically, and I think you will have to take several tries before you know how every cutout in your panel has to be made for every type of your switches. I aligned the pieces temporarily to sand some flush edges and rounded the corners of the top panels. The top panel will be painted later, but there are some parts of the panels underneath that should be painted too, to avoid the backlighting coming through the panels. So you might think that you can assemble all the three panels together and spray over it. But then I think you could run into the trouble that these edges here would stick together and you wouldn't be able to disassemble the panels later, which you will have to do to mount all the switches in. So I want to try out to place a sticker onto this panel here and then mark the positions of all these areas that should be painted too, and then cut away the sticker on these parts here. So all the parts of the panel that should be stay unpainted will be masked out with a sticker. Until now I have done the engraving by placing a separate text in STLCAM here directly onto the DXF file. This time I wanted to come out with another solution, so I wanted to use my DXF file directly to create the engraving of the text. So you can use my DXF files from my website to produce your own panels. Creating the passes for the engraving is really easy when you have closed forms like this S, the T, for example. Then you just go to the hole tool in STLCAM and select the shape. The reason for using the hole and the part tool you can see when we zoom in a little bit, and it is because you can see the hole tool will engrave on the inside of the original line, which you can see highlighted green here. Especially when you make those small letters, you don't want to waste any space here and let the letter become bigger, so you won't come over this edge here on the outside. So now select the pocket option so that it is filled. My toolpath depth will be 0.2 millimeters. And with this method you can go on with all the easy shapes here. When you are finished, you can select all the passes at once and say pocket and enter your toolpath depth. The engraving of those letters with a hole inside here will be a little bit more trickier. You select the hole tool and the outside shape, and then select the part tool and select all the inside shapes. When you then select the outside shape again and say island, the inside shapes here will be spared out. Now you enter your toolpath depth again, and with this method you go on with every other letter here. And this is how it looks when it is finished. The first switch I mounted onto the bottom layer of the flight panel is a momentary on-off-on switch. Then an on-off switch. Now some of the annunciators should be mounted in to ensure that they will fit in later. The two upper guarded switches will be on-off-on switches. And the last switches are on-off types again. Now all the annunciators are mounted at their final positions. The annunciators are fixed with thumb hot glue. For the navigation panel, you will need 4 on-off-on switches and an 8-position rotary switch.
There are different ways for backlighting such a panel. One way would be that you have a PCB where most of the components are soldered in and where also some LEDs are placed at exactly the places where they will be needed. Therefore, you need to have a professional made PCB, or you must have the ability to make your own. So I think in the hobby scene, most of the people are using these LED stripes here, and some people are making their overhead panel, placing all the panels side by side, and then place a second layer over it and cover this layer full of these LED stripes. So they light up most of the panels. The disadvantage at this method, I think, is that you throw light all over the panel and don't look exactly where you need the light, and so you still can have areas that aren't really lighted. So I will try to place the LEDs on this panel I've cut out just now, and this panel will fit over here, over these switches, and let all the cables go through here, and it will be fixed to the panel with some spacers here so that it will stay in place. And I will try to place the LEDs on this panel where I will need them. I will use a white covered MDF because I think it can reflect some light, and so I will have a better usage of the light from the LEDs.
Here you can see the process of making these backlighting panels on my CNC.
Did I say that I love this super glue and tape method for fixing things? Definitely. For fixing small or light-weighted things onto the sacrificial layer of the CNC router, this is now my favorite method, because you don't need any additional clamps to hold these pieces, and also you save material. So you can see there is only a small rest here, and this would be impossible when you're using clamps, except when you use this flying clamp method. Don't use this method for cutting aluminum or anything like this, but for lightweight pieces and this thin materials here, or especially engraving,
This is definitely my favorite method now, so thanks for the advice from the community. I positioned the LED stripes and secured them with hot glue. Now all the stripes must be soldered together. The backlighting panel is held in place by 4 15mm hex standoffs.
On the navigation panel there are installed these locking switches, which are very expensive, and you have seen I haven't installed them. I just use big on-off or on-off-on switches. But I want to come out with something that looks near these locking switches, and they come with these big caps and a big solid body. So I have printed out these caps with a 3D printer. They look something like this, and I have this aluminum tube here, and I want to drill into this cap an 8mm hole, which will allow to fit in this 8mm tube. Inside here, cut away a small piece of it and slide it over the switch. But as I have said in my knob making video, these 3D printed objects aren't filled 100%, and so I will make a silicone mold of it and cast some caps here, which are then full solid bodies, and I can drill in and slide them over this tube. But first I will have to smooth the surface a little bit.
By applying the filler with a brush, you have less sanding work to do later. I applied a coat of primer, paint and clear varnish to each cap.
I've just made this easy to build aluminum tube dispenser, and this is just a hole drilled through a piece of wood. And this will help me to cut off small and straight pieces from this longer aluminum tube.
The caps are glued onto the shafts with some epoxy and then fixed onto the switches with hot glue.
A long journey finally came to its end, but as I've written on my Instagram account, it's a big step for me, but only a small step to the finished cockpit. It's incredible how heavy these things are, and now I get a sense of how much weight there will be when the whole overhead panel is finished. I haven't showed the installation and all the programming and processing now because I want to do this later when I have redesigned my overhead frame, which will be part of my next video. And I'm looking forward to the next panel sections, but when I'm looking at the time it took me to make these two sections here, which I thought were the easiest sections of the overhead panel, then I think I will be busy the whole next year by creating this overhead panel. I'm seeing the 7-segment displays and servo motors, dual rotary encoders and so on. So there will be much content coming for you now. But you can save yourself time with all the files from my member section, and I have made you a big package. You will find all the DXF files needed to do these panels here. You will find the 3D print files to make the caps and all the knobs I've used here, and even all the prepared ASCII files so that you just can load them into your CNC router and cut these panels out. So stay tuned for another episode here on the Flightdeck, and if you don't want to miss this episode, then you should subscribe to my channel to stay informed about any upcoming new video from me. So I hope we'll see us soon back on the Flightdeck.